The previous basket is under review.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. As ever, I am your host, Eamon Brennan. As ever, I'm joined by our buddy Tate Frazier from The Ringer. We have a great show for you. We're going to talk about Houston, Kansas, which just finished on Big Monday. Nice win for the Jayhawks. Very solid win. Some questions about Houston. We're going to talk about Darryn Peterson. We're going to go back to the Darryn Peterson content mines because this thing that we've been talking about pretty frequently over the last few weeks, months, has now gone like mainstream. We're in the part of the year where, you know, there's no more Super Bowl to talk about anymore. So it's like the Darryn Peterson thing is on First Take and everywhere else. So that everybody has a lot of opinions. It's been a lot of chatter. The floodgates kind of got open last week after some of Bill Self's comments. So we're going to untangle all of that and go back through it another time, maybe with some fresh info and some fresh perspective, because, you know, Darryn Peterson gave an interview to ESPN's Myron Medcalf. There's been a column that I want to talk about that I think kind of fundamentally misunderstands the problem, and all other sorts of stuff besides. We're going to talk about Illinois, UCLA, because Tate was at that game. We're going to go back through Michigan, Duke a bit and kind of look forward a little bit and ask whether that game maybe changed our perspective a little bit on Michigan. Lots of other really good stuff to get to. Louisville UNC was tonight. Maybe kind of interested in talking about where Louisville is right now and whether this season kind of counts as a disappointment. Kentucky going through some similar stuff. There's a lot to get to. Also, Cincinnati is good at basketball again, which we really need to talk about as well.
That was not on my bingo card.
No, not at all. The bingo card did not have Cincinnati being good, but you go back and look through their numbers, they're actually like better than a tournament team for kind of an extended period of time now, even as they've been losing games, just metrics wise. And they got the huge win at Kansas this past weekend. So a lot going on in the podcast, a lot to get to, some big themes and some nitty gritty. Before we do all that, as ever, please go to basketunderreview.com, the home of this podcast and the home of some fantastic daily college basketball writing, the home of Trilly Donovan's Discord, where he breaks news, and there's tons of people in there chatting like at all hours of the day about college basketball, no matter what game's going on, what fan base you're a part of. It's all in there. For $10 a month, you get access to all that. You also support this show and what we're doing here and what the other guys are doing on the various other podcasts, Weekend Under Review and Scout Team and Stats by Will and Jim. So please go to the site, sign up. Thank you for supporting us. Thanks to everyone in at Basket Under Review. It's been a lot of fun to do this show and be part of the team over there this year, in addition, to my newsletter that I've been doing for a couple years now. Also, please, as ever, go check out our presenting sponsor, Home Field. Home Field has been doing the Home Field House college basketball tour every week. They are at a new, one of the big games of the week. They were at Houston, Iowa State last week. They'll be at Illinois, or they were at Illinois, UCLA this past weekend. They'll be at St. John's, UConn this coming Wednesday, which we will talk about looking ahead, because that's like both teams are going to go to the NCAA tournament, but that's huge for the Big East title chase. It's huge for both teams vibes wise. We're going to discuss that game in detail towards the end of the show here in a little bit. But, they'll have a booth outside of the game, outside of Gamble, or that's at that's in Hartford. Yeah, that's in Hartford. So anyway, Home Field will have a booth there. They will be outside. Please tell them, the Basket Interview podcast sent you, and go buy something and have a great time wearing your cool T-shirt that you got from Home Field. Okay, that's it. Intro done. As ever, we're in the podcast. Tate, we're coming off the Houston Kansas game here, and we're gonna get to Houston because Houston just lost its third game in a row before this past 7-day period. Had lost 5 games in their entire time in the Big 12. So we need to talk about Houston a little bit and kind of where they're at and whether we're a little bit worried about them. And granted, their 3 losses have come to 3 very good teams in difficult situations, but there's a conversation to be had there. First, though, we should lead with Kansas, which as ever has remained the most fascinating story in the sport this season. Primarily because of Darryn Peterson, but also primarily because of everybody else around Darryn Peterson and how everybody relates to Darryn Peterson and how the team looks when Darryn Peterson's not on the floor versus how they look when he's on the floor. And, he played a full slate tonight. He played a full slate against Cincinnati over the weekend when they had obviously the terrible home loss and the sky was falling and Dick Vitale was tweeting about divorce. So it's been a full onrush of discourse around this team and this player. And they kind of, funnily enough, the discourse continues to grow and be a thing, all the while Kansas kind of continues to churn out solid wins, particularly on Monday nights where Bill Self at Allen Fieldhouse is now 41-0 in his career. So where are you on the Kansas conversation and the Darryn Peterson conversation? Where should we start here?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster, and it's one of those things where with Darryn Peterson, like you said, after the Super Bowl, I feel like the national pundits got their hands on this story, and it has been extrapolated out to every different platform, and everyone's got an opinion on it, and it does seem like nobody really knows the minutia of what's going on there. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of trepidation as to whether they should talk about this situation because everybody, again, wants to figure out why the, proverbial number one pick is not playing, why he subbed himself out in a certain game, why Bill Self kind of finally dropped the veil of defense, right, at Oklahoma State, which I think that also played into it. That's his alma mater. It's a game that he cares about. And maybe, Darryn Peterson doesn't care as much as Bill Self did during that game. And then afterwards, Bill Self just kind of finally admitted, things are not as they seem. Or maybe they are like they seem from the outside looking in, because it does feel like they don't know when he's going to play. Darryn Peterson seems to not really have an answer as to why and when and if he will play. And the injuries of the whole situation are strange. His response is strange. It is interesting that we're finally getting him to respond, right? Myron Metcalf, we'll talk about his story, finally getting Darryn Peterson on the record. Again, a lot of people were pushing back on poor Myron, being like, why didn't you, get more of a straight answer on this? And he's like, what am I going to do? Force this kid to tell me, you know what I mean? I just ask the questions. I write what he gives me. I move forward. And the interesting part to me is that this Kansas team could win the national championship, as we've talked about on the show, and they are, their top seven is elite. And when they play like they did, especially on these big Mondays, 41-0, like you said, for Bill Self, we see a very special group. I think the interesting wrinkle with this team, especially as we saw against Cincinnati, is they have been connected when Darryn has returned, and I think that's been a testament to the other guys. But it felt like in the Cincinnati game, it was the first time that even the players themselves outside of Peterson kind of broke and they kind of went off script, and it seemed like they were frustrated by sort of the outside noise, and they get back on track tonight. Peterson really fit in, right? It kind of reminds me of the LeBron James, Kevin Love discourse back when he joined the Cavaliers, where he's like, we need guys to fit in, not fit out, right? It does feel like Darryn Peterson has decided to fit in with this group and playing as kind of the off guard. I mean, he is a point guard by nature. Melvin Council is obviously the point guard of this team and the fan favorite of this team. I was telling you off the air, I have some Kansas people in my life. They're like, I don't even know what I would rank him as far as the most liked player on this team, which is kind of crazy when you talk about the number one pick. But that's what the discourse has created here. And we can get into the agent, we can get into the dad. But again, that's a lot of speculative talk that is not necessarily fair when we don't have, it coming straight from the horse's mouth. So we can only take what we see. What we've seen lately is that he is playing games, and his dad, I follow him on Instagram, met him in the McDonald's All-American game. He put on his Instagram, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So hopefully that to me alludes to the premise that he is going to finish out the season strong and be a part of this group. And if he is, and when he is, they're a really talented team. So, I mean, I think that's an encouraging sign and a big win for Kansas against Houston, and a really tough win because they came out the gates a little sluggish and they were able to find their footing. And Trey White, yet again, who's kind of been the glue of this team, finds a way to have one of his best games of the season with 23 points. So to me, the story is like, can Darryn Peterson just continue to be available? And if he can, what does this ceiling look like for this team? Because if he plays and continues to play 30-plus minutes a night, like I said, they can make it to Indianapolis, and who knows, they might win the third title for Bill Self.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bill Self talked about it immediately after the game on Scott Van Pelt's show about their ceiling being extremely high, but them also being able to play like they did on Saturday against Cincinnati when he credited Cincinnati. But look, the nature of that game had to involve a bad Kansas performance, and it was very bad. And I think the fact that it was Peterson's first full game after the Oklahoma State situation fueled a lot of the reaction that you saw. I mean, I think, yeah, like the floodgates got opened big time last week after Bill Self said what he said after the Oklahoma State game. And, you know, if you actually just read the quote in isolation, there's still tons of plausible deniability there. But if you have any kind of ear for Bill Self and you watch him actually say it, or you just kind of can read between the lines a little bit, it was the first time that he let out any sort of disappointment and lack of, or a surprise, really. Just the first time he seemed surprised that Peterson didn't finish a game. There had been no other time this season where any sort of situation like this happened where Bill Self said anything after the game that made it seem like he wasn't expecting it, that it wasn't all good, that there was no issue with it. Yeah, we hope to have him. He couldn't go, blah, blah, blah. The Oklahoma State thing was the first time after a bunch of times of it happening where Self mentioned it's happened a bunch of times. And it was disappointing because he could have had a really big night. And you could just sort of get the vibe of like, I mean, he said this, I thought we were past this. That's like a direct quote. And then on Friday, in his pregame press conference before the Cincinnati game, he had more comments, which were, you know, again, defending the player, talking about his health, allowing him to play. And, you know, we have seen, at least I have seen, and I think this is a fair enough argument, draft people, you know, put up clips on Twitter of how he looked in high school or how he looked in the preseason this year physically, and the elevation he's getting on his jump shot and how he gets around screens with the ball in his hand and sort of the level of explosion. And their assumption is that, yeah, he's dealing with something. There's some sort of injury or lack of trust in his lower extremities that is causing him to play in a more reserved and careful way than he did certainly last season as a high school player, and even maybe, you know, in the fall when he was coming in before he missed a bunch of games for Kansas. All fair enough. And Self, you know, mentioned that on Friday again, like if his body allows him to play. And if it doesn't, you know, they'll say something else. But he said, you know, if you want to change the narrative, there's one thing to do: play, finish. And that to me, again, was as clear a sign as you get of a coach just kind of being like, look, man, either play or don't. Because the thing that's challenging about it, and I think we maybe saw in this win against Houston a little bit of the potential, like, best case scenario, is that even if Peterson is not what he could be athletically, even if he is nursing something, or he's not technically injured, but is not feeling 100% and kind of doesn't want to go crazy with it, it's just a little bit worried about his body, whatever the case may be. Kansas can kind of just do its thing that they've been doing when he hasn't played, and instead of, you know, Jamari McDowell standing in the corner, it's Darryn Peterson.
Right.
Like, that's still great. That's fine. The problem is that Kansas has been dealing with this situation where Peterson plays, he takes like 36% of their shots, and the ball just flows through him constantly. And it can get stuck, you know, for a guy with that many touches, and for where he initiates offense and where his touches come, he has a pretty low assist rate. Like, he's
one assist tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's not a particularly like pass first kind of guy. He's a pure scorer, and he's extremely good at it. And the Oklahoma State game, part of what made it, I think, so frustrating for Self and for people watching, just even me as a total neutral, you know, college basketball fan, where it comes to Kansas, is just like, he was almost effortlessly fantastic in that first half. Like, he just couldn't be stopped. And it was sort of just like, I wrote about this on my newsletter last week, I think Friday, or maybe Thursday. It was just like, it was like watching a guy who used to be a pro show up to like a pretty good pickup game and just like come in, get some shots up, make everything, and then trot off and be like, that's it for me today, I'm good. And like, that's simultaneously how good he is and kind of how aloof and frustrating he can be to watch as a fan. And so, you know, it's created this situation where there's almost like two Kansas teams, and there's one with Peterson, there's one without, and reconciling those two things, if he's going to be available, is a challenge. And I think this game tonight, as you alluded to, is kind of maybe some sort of a middle ground. Like he took plenty of shots, ended plenty of possessions, had a 29% usage rate, ended up with 14 points, shot 2 of 7 from 3. Wasn't amazing, but was fine. And if you are just like, if you have that guy as your wild card on the perimeter, just kind of in the flow of the offense and doing the stuff that Kansas does when he's not on the floor, then that's probably the ideal scenario that Bill Self would envision for the rest of the season here, because it's not going to be 14 points. It's usually going to be like 25.
Yeah, and Metcalf in his piece had in there, which I think kind of sums it up from Bill Self's standpoint, where he was like, I still don't feel like I've had the opportunity to coach Darryn Peterson, right? It does feel like when Darryn plays, it's like this luxurious tool that we have where we kind of work on his terms and everybody fits in around him. And it did feel like tonight, I was telling you, like I was watching, he hit his first 3 and he has like this celebratory moment. He doesn't get back on defense. Defense gets behind him, and Bill Self kind of loses it on him. And Peterson looks at the bench and kind of gives like almost like he was almost shocked that I mean, not even shocked. He was like kind of like, what? You know what I mean? It's like kind of a death stare that he gave to Bill Self. Bill Self does the same thing to Trey White on I think it was 2 possessions later when Trey White hits a 3 and he's celebrating in the corner. And then Trey White, because he is sort of like, he can probably be coached harder than anybody on that team. And he, sprints on the court like the bulldog that he is and continues to play on and yada, yada, yada. And then at the end of the game, the person that hits that corner 3, you were talking about like El Marco, whoever it is in the corner, McDowell, it's a kick to the corner to Darryn Peterson with his perfect jump shot that hits a 3 that is basically the game sealing 3 in this game to get them to 67 points, and they're up 14, and the rest is history. Game over. Thank you, Darryn Peterson, for showing up. I mean, it is like, to me, the perfect example of like where we are. It did feel like in this game, Bill Self coached Darryn Peterson like he was not Darryn Peterson, like he was another guy on Kansas's team. And I'm not saying that that's where Bill Self needs to be, but I think that Bill Self needs to, in his own mind and with respect to Darryn Peterson, like he was like, I need to get to a situation where we're on an even playing field here. Like I've given you the upper hand for far too long. You have taken it and made me look a little bit like I'm out of sorts, and this isn't my controlled team. And that's not how this is going to work. And I did feel like tonight this was Bill Self kind of being like, you did what you did, on Saturday. This is my get back game. You're going to play within the bounds of who we are as this team. And when Kansas plays like this and they play through Badunga and they play through Melvin Council and Darryn Peterson is an additive, I mean, that was sort of what it was tonight. I mean, Fran Fraschilla said it was a quiet game. I just thought it was Darryn Peterson like being another guy on the court. And it turns out that guy is a potential number 1 pick. And if you need him to get the keys and turn it up and crank it up and be the guy 100% and go to a 36, 37, God forbid, 40% usage rate, he could still do that too. But like, it was nice to see him finally kind of accept Bill Self and Kansas's coaching. And I just think that that's like a good step in the right direction. Like, as I forecast the future of this team, and again, like Bill Self said, he thinks he's past it. I feel like this was the first turn of the corner. As far as like, we've had all the muck, we've had all the conversation, it's all out, we've aired our grievances. Let's get back to basketball. And when they get back to the basketball, this is a really dangerous team. And yes, Houston shot 31% from the field. Not a great night for them, but Kansas's defense was suffocating. Like, the story of the game was Kansas's defense, Trey White being spectacular on offense and making big shots. And then, like I said, Darryn Peterson closing the game out. Pretty good recipe for success.
Yeah. And I mean, Badunga dominated the game defensively.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
How good is he? Like,
he's so good.
He's probably, because
of Bill Russell reference from Fran at one point.
Yeah, he did. Fran called it, said he looked like Bill Russell, which was aggressive, but also I kind of like, he was talking about visually. Yeah, he was talking about visually the block that he had, but I know that was one where I was like, Fran might get a couple tweets about that, but he'll respond to him. He doesn't mind.
He loves it.
Yeah, but I kind of saw what he was talking about, just in like lanky defense first forward center guy who moves super well and
incredible timing on the
guarding
block.
Guards, and just like Badunga is so good. He's Kansas's best player in my view.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not the most talented player, but in terms of like production and what he's given the team this year, I think he's got to be Kansas's number one guy. Because, you know, like without Peterson, they've figured it out. Without Badunga, they'd be nowhere. You know, they just don't have another guy remotely like that on the roster. So we shouldn't overlook that. But yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of funny is like, because we do this, you know, year round, and we're locked in on college basketball, and we've been following the story since the fall, really, when Peterson got on campus, and the read on Kansas's roster from afar, but also anybody you talk to around Kansas, anybody who covers Kansas locally or went to see a practice was just like, Peterson's unbelievable. Like he's so good, but they're going to need him to be so good because the rest of this roster is kind of, you know, it's a lot of makeshift guys. It's, you know, Bryson Tiller's a 4-star guy. Who knows where he'll be? Badunga, I think it was assumed would kind of be what he was last year, but maybe a little bit better, not anything close to what he has become. And the name recognition on the roster wasn't there. And, you know, they missed out on some recruits. They wanted Darian Williams out of Texas Tech, didn't get him. You know, he went to NC State. They wanted Dame Sarr. That was one of the big transfer portal targets that was rumored constantly, didn't happen. And so they came into this season with this roster of sort of like, hey, well, you know, they've got the guy who might be the number one pick, and they got a bunch of other guys around him, and Self will have to kind of figure it out. And what's funny is that he's figured it out while having Peterson again, even with tonight's effort. You know, he's up to 41% of available minutes this year, which is like, you know, that's seventh, you know, that's your second guy off the bench basically on most rosters. Like that's not, those are barely 6-man minutes in the total course of the season. Now, when he's fully available, he plays 30 minutes or whatever. But he's missed so many games and missed parts of games so frequently that the numbers just haven't been there. But we've been talking about this for so long, I feel like, because it's been such a thing with all the missed games early in the year, and then him coming back and kind of not, and taking himself out of games, and then playing for 30 minutes and looking good and blah, 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 blah. That we are now in the space with college basketball where we're not too far away from Selection Sunday. The Super Bowl is over, and you get the national media, non-dedicated to college, the generalist sort of national media, whether that's your First Takes or your national columnists, now taking a much bigger interest in this whole dynamic, because this is potentially the number one overall pick. There's drama to it, right? There's it could potentially be nefarious or not. Why is this guy blah, blah, blah. And you know, there was a column that ran on Monday in The Athletic by Jerry Brewer, who's a writer I really like and respect, and is a really nice guy. And this is not in any way like a dig on him, but that I just fully fundamentally disagreed with. And then I think people, you know, might read as sort of casual college basketball fans and think this is like the state of play in the sport. And I kind of want to push back on it. So I'm going to read the last few paragraphs of it because, you know, essentially Jerry lays out the entire Darryn Peterson situation. And the thesis of his column is that this is like a bigger psychic thing about college basketball fans struggling to come to terms with the fact that the game, because of NIL, because of the transfer portal, whatever, is a business now, and we don't like that. And so these are the last few paragraphs of the column. Sometimes the can't miss prospect misses too much time. NIL didn't make the sport transactional. It made the transaction impossible to ignore. We despise how professionalized the sport has become. We bristle at transfer portals and bidding wars and freshmen with multi-million-dollar deals. We want authenticity and devotion. We want players who care more about cutting down necks than protecting pro contracts that haven't been drafted. With every tentative movement, Peterson confirms our worst fear. When the college game turns into a glorified minor league, it behooves the player to manage risk as much as he chases greatness. We think this means Peterson doesn't care. However, it may mean that he understands too much. College basketball isn't broken simply because elite freshmen tread lightly into their futures. It is strained because after all this time, we still can't adjust to this reality. We say we understand the business. We just can't accept having to see it on the floor. Again, respect Jerry very much, and like this column in a way because it's thoughtful, and he's like he often does, is trying to go a level deeper than just, hey, what about this crazy Darryn Peterson situation? Here's my take about it. That said, I could not disagree more. I just couldn't disagree more with the premise of the column. Nobody likes players when we feel like they don't play. This is also true. Every NBA fan knows it's a transactional business. They talk about it all the time. What percentage of NBA coverage these days is about contracts, draft picks, trade potential, front office moves that have nothing to do have little to do with the actual basketball on the floor, right?
I mean, tanking is more important than the basketball. I mean, just look at any coverage of the NBA. It's all about tanking. Yeah,
it's a massive, massive like sub industry within basketball itself, and people don't like it there either. They don't like tanking. They don't like load management. They don't like the idea that a guy is getting paid whatever amount of money it is and not playing because of, just not feeling it tonight, or I'm a little tight, whatever. Or I'm actually perfectly fine, but I want to make sure I'm good to go for the NBA playoffs or my next contract or whatever the case may be. Fans hated it so much that they made a rule that you have to be eligible for 65% of, you have to play 65 games. I almost said 65%. I don't know if it's more than that percentage wise of 82, but you have to play 65 games to be eligible for end of season awards in the NBA, right? All NBA, MVP, right? Is it all NBA? It's both of those.
Yeah, it's all the above. Yeah. All the awards. Yeah.
And that's like messing up the NBA, the MVP conversation and the all NBA conversation this year, because the best players in the sport might not hit the threshold, and someone's going to win the MVP who's not Jokic or SGA, which is like one of those two guys should be winning the MVP. They're the two best players in the world. So this is not a college basketball specific thing. It's not a psychic trauma thing. And it's also notably not a widespread thing in college basketball. AJ DeBonsa just played 40 minutes against Iowa State. He's either the number 2 pick or the number 1 pick, probably. Cam Boozer just plays every minute Shire will put him on the floor. Darius Acuff just played 50 minutes last week against Alabama in a double overtime game and was absolutely spectacular. No other freshmen are doing this, which is part of the reason why I kind of think Peterson might actually be a little bit injured. Not fully injured, can still play injured, but is like a little worried about, some potential worse injury that would jeopardize his status. But like none of the stuff about that is something I dislike about college basketball. I like that guys get paid. I like that there's all these talented freshmen. I like that there's European guys in the game. I like that, basically I'm willing to kind of sacrifice some of the mid-major stuff if I get higher quality games at the top end of the sport and really good teams in the Final Four every year. I'm all good with that. I think college basketball is better than it's ever been under the current structure, even if it's woolly and the news cycle is weird. And, James Nagy throws everything for a loop and Betty Akko is in court playing 5 games, doing whatever.
He's filing another injunction, by the way. He's
is he really?
Come back. Yeah.
Oh God, please! I can't talk about Charles Bediako anymore. They're 4-0 since he hasn't played.
Right.
By the way, so
I can't do that whole news cycle again. Yeah.
The winning percentage is better without him. By the way, just worth considering. Anyway, I'm perfectly happy with the state of college basketball in so many ways. The Peterson thing and the reason why it makes people upset is a purely one person type of thing. We want to watch you play college basketball because we think you're awesome. We want to see Kansas at its full potential. We want to see like the, 95th percentile outcome of this team. And when you dominate a game in a first half against Oklahoma State, turn to the bench and be like, I'm good. Please take me out of the game, and then don't return. That is going to strike people as very weird. And it has nothing to do with the overall state of college basketball or whether or not we like kids getting paid.
Yeah, it's a one-off. It doesn't have to be the thing that leads to a larger conversation. That's not really a larger conversation, like you said, because we have so many other examples of it not being a real thing. And I do think Darryn Peterson at some level, there's probably an injury, as we know. There's something going on where he may not be 100%. And there's been a few instances that are maybe eyebrow raising, but it is, we're at the point of emphasis that there is something with the hamstring. Also, those clips that the people were circulating in one of those games, Travis Branham, he was at the game. He was like, he went out of this game for cramps. You know what I mean? So like, this is also it's very Darryn Peterson specific, as you said. And I think that's why it's a good thought, but I don't think it's a problem that is going to. It'd be the same thing if we did this with Ben Simmons, right? Like Ben Simmons basically spit in the face of college basketball for his 1 year and still went number 1 overall. And we all had to go through that HBO doc where he was basically like, I hate college basketball. And again, it's not about anything other than this is Ben Simmons and we learned later that Ben Simmons just really didn't like basketball. I don't think that Darryn Peterson is in that same camp. He has said as much. He's like, I love the game of basketball. We see him play at such a high level. He's like a prodigy, right? I mean, that's really the word. He's a basketball prodigy that we're watching out on the court. And for him to be in this situation, I just feel like he played with the more urgency tonight because he wants to fight back against those things. I mean, look, it's led to conversations that, AJ DeBanza after the game, right? He goes, if they want me to play 40 minutes, I'll play 40 minutes, right? Like it's led into a situation where now his contemporaries, his, guys that he'll be battling against at the next level are now getting leverage on him. And I think he's going to respond to that. And I believe that this was the first step in that response. But like you said, I don't take this as some sort of larger conversation to be like the system is broken in the sense that like we don't have leadership to come up with actual rules that work. But the system is not broken because Darryn Peterson is doing what's best for Darryn Peterson. And I do think that at the end of the day, this conversation, it's good fodder, but it is a little bit like that to me is like taking an inch and running a mile. You know what I mean? It's like the one thing is Darryn Peterson. The one situation is Darryn Peterson. It's very specific to Darryn Peterson. And look, we might get, let's say in a year, a full breakdown of like how this all played out with some amazing in-depth, hopefully reported feature that is like some sort of journalistic take from someone locally that's been covering this day to day. And we understand the nuances of what's really going on here because again, we all know different pieces of it. I know people there. I know people there. You try to piece it together. But at the end of the day, like college basketball, I was saying this the other day when Bill Simmons was talking about Darryn Peterson and was kind of going back and forth. It was like, this might hurt him at the next level. And I'm like, you talk to scouts, they already know what it is, right? They're not really going to change their trajectory or opinion of Darryn Peterson. Maybe some teams will, but for the most part, it is what it is. But it kind of leads us into the wrong weeds. Like Bediako Najee, like we're in the wrong weeds. Like this Darryn Peterson extrapolating to like, this is what's wrong with college basketball and we don't like it. We're in the wrong weeds. Like there is a beautiful grass lawn that is perfectly kempt and ready to go. That is this season of college basketball with incredible talent, incredible teams, incredible storylines, great coaching at a high level. Just look at Shire versus Dusty May on Saturday, right? I mean, like, we're getting way too lost. And yes, those stories matter, but like they're not the primary. Like we're using way too much brain power and emphasis in the wrong spaces with these types of things. And that's why I'm hoping that this Darryn Peterson thing kind of gets nipped in the bud because I do feel like that will help, us get back on track because it's been a great year of college basketball. And this is just like, it's not the time to take away and detract from that because it is a one-off, very specific situation with a very specific certain player. And, I root for Darryn Peterson. Like I want him to be healthy. I want him to be. I
want to watch him play.
Right. We all do.
That's the only reason why I get annoyed why the Oklahoma State thing was doing. He's like, he could have gone for 40. That's kind of what Self is alluding to.
Too. Like we had a number 1 versus number 2 pick. That's the easiest way to bring in this general audience, right? And he has an incredible first half. Like you said, one of those first halves that you're just like, God, this is just so easy for him. And he's just done. And then you're like, don't tempt me with a good time.
Yeah, come on, man.
I want to see it.
Yeah.
And I do feel like if he can finish and play, as Bill Self demonstratively said to the people, like if he plays, all this is done. This conversation is done. And we're talking about the basketball, which is what you and I want to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, look, I haven't thought once about what Darryn Peterson is getting paid and whether or not he deserves it or not.
Right.
which Jerry kind of alludes to as part of the reason why, people will feel like some sort of psychic pain about the situation. It's like, I don't care about that at all. Like, put those checks in his bank account. It has nothing to do with me. I don't care. I don't care what Caleb Wilson's getting paid. I don't care what Darius Acuff's getting paid. I hope they're getting paid requisite to their value. But
and in most cases, nobody knows what they're getting paid because the agents report wrong numbers, and you know what I mean. Like the whole thing is a charade. So
the whole ecosystem is, what's funny is that the whole ecosystem is so low info that like the smart coaches, there's like tons of alpha to be exploited out there, which is what I think Dusty May did this year. And we're going to get to them and Duke in a second here. It was like, there's a ton of like, oh yeah, I heard this guy got this. Oh, I heard get that, but like, we don't know. We don't have Sport Track or whatever the NBA reference or whatever, whatever the salary website of the time currently is. That might tell you I'm a little bit out of the loop on the NBA front office discussions of like what people even verify salaries on.
I used to be Hoops Hype. I think everybody's still locked in. Yeah.
I think it used to be Hoops Hype, if I remember back in the day.
Yeah, they're all out there, but we can't do the records request, the public records request on all these teams, especially with private schools. So like, again, it's all a guessing game, and every single agent that throws out a number is doing it. And I say this with respect to the agents that I know in the business, with bad faith. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Like, these are bad.
It's their whole job.
Yeah, exactly.
The higher the numbers sound, the more likely it is the numbers get bigger.
Right.
It's that. I mean, so anyway, like, I don't care what Darryn Peterson is getting paid. I don't care that he is getting paid. And there's just always this tendency that frustrates me to be like, oh man, college basketball fans, they just can't take the fact that these kids are getting paid and they have to, they're thinking about the business side of it. It's just like, no one else is doing that. I'm not thinking about it on my end of things. I could not care less what Darryn Peterson is getting paid this year by Kansas boosters or NIL collectives or Adidas or whomever. Could not care. And like, no one else is. AJ DeBonsa is not doing this stuff, which again, I think probably is, makes the case that he's dealing with something physical and has been, and whether he's dealing with it in a way that is like totally commensurate to the nature of the injury or whatever is up for debate. But like, all these other guys are playing all the time, and whatever amount of money they're making, whatever chunk of the Tyson chicken fortune Darius Acuff is making could not be more immaterial to me. Like, I love watching that kid play. He's probably my number one guy to watch in college.
You and Kendrick Perkins, you guys love him, man.
Yeah, Perk said he would take him number one overall.
Perk said he's number one pick. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, look, I wouldn't go quite that far. I do love Darius Acuff. I wouldn't put him number one, but I do think there's a clear pro there. Although I read Sam Vecini a column about this when I was kind of trying to figure out where a lot of these guards are going to go, and he wrote a column also on The Athletic a few weeks back now, where he basically was like, if you look at the number of guards that could go in this draft and the number of freshmen and the number of really top level players that are also upperclassmen and some of the European guys, like, there's going to be a glut of guys to the point where, not Darius Acuff, but like some of these guys may slip to the later parts of the first round. And if you're Acuff, you may say like, hey, actually, I'll take another $5 million or whatever it's going to be to stay at Arkansas another year and test my luck in the next draft, which is going to be way less freshman and guard heavy. Which I read that and was just like, oh my God, please.
Yeah, like, that'd be great for college basketball.
Get Darius back on campus one more year. I'd love to see it. But anyway, man, whether Darryn Peterson plays or not has nothing to do with college basketball overall. We're good. Like, it's fine. Everybody's kind of fine right now. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who out there who, grew up watching college basketball in the 80s or whatever, who don't like the current state of affairs. But my thing is more like, hey, when you're playing for a team, if you can play, you should play. And that's kind of as simple as it gets. And that that extends to the NBA, whether a guy's making $2 million a year or 25 or 50 or whatever it is. It's just like play. And no matter what the level, people don't like it when they think you can play and you're not playing. And that's kind of where we are in Darryn Peterson. But again, big win for Kansas tonight. Slightly concerning for Houston. This is their third loss in a row. In the past 7 days, they've lost seven. Well, the past 7 days as of Monday night when we're recording, they've lost 3 games. They had lost 5 games before this week in their entire time in the Big 12. And I'm a little concerned with Houston. I have kind of held them in the same regard as I always do with Houston, which is like really good. We'll figure it out. There's a couple flaws there. Yeah, as we've gone deeper into the season, like, yeah, they do kind of have a lot of possessions where one of the 3 guards kind of dribbles the ball out and then chucks a 3, and it's not quite as open or as in flow as it was last year, and it's a little bit more and I think this past week is when it's really shown up. And I still think Houston, like, their baseline of defense and rebounding plus Fleming's on top of it with the veteran guards around him, like, they could still absolutely go to the Final Four, but I don't know that they're going to get to the level that maybe I thought they were going to get to even a few weeks ago, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Houston has a problem, which is they cannot generate offense in the half court consistently. And it does feel like the defense, their defensive intensity, their monster trapping that they like to do has created a lot of transition opportunities. And when they get those, all things are a go. They look like the Houston that you and I know, and it's all good. But when they have been stuck and they've kind of been stuck in the mud in the half court, you see the flaws of this team, which is basically like, we don't have Juwan Roberts, right? We don't have someone that we can throw the ball to in the post and say, hey, just get us an easy basket to kind of settle the terms here and get us back on track in a game. And you saw them kind of in quicksand tonight, and they just kept trying to force it. It was like, okay, Uzan, your turn. Kingston, your turn. Sharp, your turn. Someone save us from the outside. And, Kelvin Sampson has said it, in the past. I haven't seen his press conference tonight, but at least the past 2 press conferences, he was just like, look, we're a jump shooting team. We're not shooting the ball well. And that's a concern for us because we can't generate easy offense. And, it used to be like, hey, even if we don't shoot well, we at least get offensive rebounds. I know they had 13 offensive rebounds in this game, but not enough to get easy buckets off misses as they've been able and been prone to do. And I think that's really the concerning thing for them in the offense or in the half court, because they have not been able to, even off misses, get rebounds and then get an easy layup out of those situations where the defense is all over the place, because they've just consistently continued to miss jump shots and just take more and more. And it just seems like it's just like compiling over and over again. And I do think they'll weather the storm a little bit. It's shocking they've lost 3 games for the first time since 2017 because it just feels like this is a machine. And, Sampson is a really good coach. He gets the one nitpick that you get with Kelvin Sampson, right, is like, what are we running, on offense? Like, it does feel like a little bit bogged down at times. And for whatever reason with this team, especially without someone like Roberts on the inside, I know Tugler is great as he is as kind of a defensive weapon, offensive rebounding machine, all that sort of stuff. But he just doesn't have the offensive skill to really create his own shot. And even when he gets fouled, he doesn't make the free throws, right? So those are empty possessions that are being created even when he does get the ball in the paint. And Sinak, I guess, was supposed to be a little bit of that remedy, but he's been pushed out to the 3-point line where he doesn't feel comfortable. He had a 3 tonight in this game, but he had multiple possessions after he hit that 3 where he passed up open looks where you could just see he was like, I don't want any part of this. And teams have done a good job scouting him and making sure, that's the shot that we give him, right? He's a good mid-range shooter. He's got good feel. He can play out of the post, but physically, he's just not at that spot where he can go down and bang on the block and get you an easy bucket. So in general, the half-court offense is really, really mucked up right now. And yes, they like to muck things up. That's what Houston does. But if Kingston Flemings can't save them, from the outside, and Emmanuel Sharp can't hit, a couple threes or whatever it is, they just really, really look putrid on offense. And I think this game was a perfect example of it. I do feel like you and I were talking, Kelvin Sampson will have them, going through a brutal practice over the next week. And we'll see a very fired up version of this Houston team. But I don't know if they have the right horses to remedy it to make a real run for a title right now. And maybe they do, maybe they figure out some things, but offensively in the half court, it's ugly, you know? So I think that's really the big problem. If the game gets slowed down, unfortunately, that's not really a strong suit of Houston, and the defense isn't as good as it was, you know? Like they're not creating the turnovers they need to create, which is really, that's the bread and butter of what they want to do.
Yeah, look, I mean, they are still a very good team on both sides of the ball, but a lot of what makes them good is when you dig into the stats and you know, watch them play, as we have a ton, is the kind of like shot volume, winning the math kind of stuff, right? It's the stuff that, you know, they're still a top 25 offensive rebounding team. They're not a top 2-3 offensive rebounding team the way they usually are, but they still generate enough shots. They still, you know, force enough turnovers on the defensive end and don't turn the ball over on offense. And they get looks and then often get offensive rebounds and get new looks out of that. But you're right. The sort of, okay, pretend we live in a world where you get to take one attempt and you come down the floor, you try to take your best shot, you run your offense in the half court. And if this shot doesn't go in, the possession is over. We walk back down to the other end, check it up top. In that world, Houston's in trouble because they do not, besides Fleming's, and I'll even say this about Uzan, I'll say this about Sharp right now. They are not generating enough good, easy offensive looks. And you saw it all night against Kansas. And you're right. Tugler is a really good offensive rebounder. They tried to put him in the post stuff and do some of the Jaywan Roberts stuff with him early in the season. It was just like, this is not a no-go.
No.
Like, this is not going to work. And this is not what he is. And that's fine. Like, he's very good for what he is. He's a fantastic defender, really good rebounder, and a really good offensive rebounder. And so is key to what they do on offense in many ways. But yeah, the Sampson has mentioned it a bunch in the past week. You're right. It's just like, we can't throw the ball to anyone in the post and get a look. We have to make shots. And if we're not making shots, things look a little ugly. And look, I still think, you know, in the tournament, their baseline is still high enough where you get into close games and Fleming's, who is brilliant, might be enough to get you over the line a couple of times. But up against the really, really big hitters in the sport, two of which we're about to talk about, there's, you know, the slight, very slight, but noticeable downgrade from last season is there and should be considered as we're talking about the best teams in the country, because yeah, I like this Houston team. I love the freshman, but you mentioned Sinak. I mean, he had 2 open shots on one possession that he declined.
He passed up both, and that was after he had just made a 3.
Yeah,
that to me was like one of the telltale signs of the night. And I saw Sampson on the Kellen Sampson, not Kelvin, his son. They showed Kellen on the bench, and he just like put his head in his hands. You know what I mean? Because he's just like, even if you miss it, like, we just have to take it. You know, like we just
open
have to keep
3,
him honest.
you have to take it. You
Right.
have to take it. And he's shot it fine this year. He's been in a slump lately. And Fran mentioned it on the broadcast of like, he's 5 of 25 in his last whatever, but like, okay, lots of good shooters hit, have a slump like that. It's not the end of the world. Shoot the ball, man. And they need stuff like that because again, the easy buckets are not going to come. And
it changes Kansas's calculus on defense, right? You hit a couple of those, and maybe they change what they're doing, and that opens up lanes for Flemings and Uzan, and then Emmanuel Sharp isn't getting ran off the 3-point. I mean, Emmanuel Sharp is just shooting, I call them Hail Mary threes. Like, 100%. Yes, some of them go down, but like they're just, they're not great shots. I mean, they're great for him, I guess, because he's a great shooter, but like they're just complete, he's almost out of bounds when he's shooting some of these threes. And you're just like, that can't be our shot diet on a regular basis.
No, yeah, guarded 26 footers are not
fading away, right?
Not the ideal, yeah, for sure. So some issues there. I mean, look, yeah, Kelvin will put them through probably the worst practice of all of their lives tomorrow, probably, or Tuesday. Probably as you're hearing this, Houston's players have already
they're running.
They're vomiting in the trash can on the baseline.
Right.
They're going through it right now. But I'm not sure that the stuff that is plaguing them is fixable with like attitude and effort and all of the like crazy cultural buy-in stuff that Sampson drills into his guys. I think it's kind of already there. I think they just have some more technical flaws, which brings me to the Michigan Wolverines and their loss to the Duke Blue Devils on Saturday, which to me, I have to say, without overreacting to one 40-minute game of basketball, I do feel like kind of broke the spell a little bit for me with Michigan. And we can get into it, but I felt like watching them against a team with commensurate talent in the front court, arguably superior talent in the front court, if not the same amount of size, felt like the first time that I saw Michigan as a really smartly constructed group of characteristics that, again, win on the math basically every night, dominate both rims, easy buckets for us, no easy buckets for you. Perimeter size means you get no threes. And so you're always in no man's land in the middle, in the mid range, trying to shoot a 15-footer over Mara with his outstretched arm. And then you see them up against a team like Duke, which is position for position, essentially equally sized. They're not as big as Mara in the front court. And Lindeberg is basically Boozer's height. And so they are kind of a weird matchup. But all of the size that kind of matters for Michigan is there with Duke. And then there was a little bit of a level of technical skill on top of it that to me was like, oh, like the good news for Dusty May in Michigan to me is that there are like 2-3 teams in the country that could potentially do that. There might only be one, right? And they played them on Saturday. But it was a little bit like, oh, maybe this team, to me anyway, and I'm interested to see if your view on this changed at all. But to me, all season since the Players era, Michigan has been even as Arizona's had their incredible season, to me personally, I have always had Michigan as like 1A. This is the national title favorite. It's close, but it's not as close as a lot of people will say. And that fell away a little bit for me watching that game Saturday night with the way Duke moved them around on defense, completely kept them off the offensive glass, defended them at every spot, and the way, frankly, Boozer was effective against that much size and athleticism in the front court. Like the scales fell from my eyes a little bit with Michigan. And also I was like, Boozer, I get it now. Oh my God. Like, you're right. He's a pro. I'm sorry. Like, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, it was one of those games where Lindeborg came out and was perfect, right? I mean, he goes 5 for 5. You saw like kind of a man on a mission to prove a point that he is, in the conversation. Obviously, Cam Boozer is going to be the National Player of the Year. He's going to win the Wooden Award. You and I have, I think we said that 3 weeks ago at this point, and it does feel
it's been over.
Yeah, it's been over. It's been a foregone conclusion. But again, the response early in this game from Michigan was like, okay, let's send a message. Let's show who we are as a team. Morez Johnson had the huge double pump dunk on Boozer, right? It was sort of like, oh, here's the physicality of Michigan that you and I both have, one, respected, and two, is the reason why they've been in the conversation as the number one team. But the fact that Duke was able to, one, have the same similar length and size to be able to respond at every single level, also have the assurance of Cam Boozer. And I say that as like, it pretty much like if Cam Boozer gets the basketball in a possession, you're going to get a good look for the most part. And the two plays to me that really struck a chord as far as like, wow, I'm okay to, say Duke is the number one team in the country, and I feel like that's a very fair place to be, and rightfully so. They just beat the team that you and I just said was our number one team coming into this game. Is, they cut the lead to 1. Lindeborg hits the 3, 56-57. Shire calls a timeout. He understands what they're doing on these switches, draws up a great play. They get a nice back cut by Boozer. And the reason why Morez Johnson can't respond and react without being a little bit of like that moment of hesitation where he doesn't drop back in coverage on that lob to Isaiah Evans is because Cam Boozer is at the 3-point line, and he has to honor Cam Boozer from the 3-point line, and they get an easy dunk and they get up 3, and the next possession down, they swing, kick out to Cam Boozer, who knocks down a 3. And it's like that back-to-back hit from Duke just kind of shows you why they are so dangerous, because it's like playing off of Cam Boozer, it's a pick your poison situation. They know what they're running. They have great connectivity. When Isaiah Evans is that second fiddle, as he was in this game and was electric in this game, they're just really dangerous as a group. And defensively, Duke is just so long, and Malik Brown is such a weapon for them that you can throw him on so many different guys as they did in this game. It's just such a matchup nightmare and mismatch for most every other team in the country. It wasn't for Michigan, vice versa, because of the size of both these teams. But Boozer is kind of the one that takes you over the edge, and he is the best player in the country. You see why he's the best player in the country. And I even thought, like, Caden Boozer, I know he didn't, I don't even think he scored. Yeah, he didn't even score in this game, but he had 3 like really beautiful assists that were just like, well, like taking Michigan's front court, getting their eyes on him, getting them in the air, and then making a beautiful pass in the post for an easy Gongba dunk or Gongba layup or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So, like, Duke just played a really solid game. This was a little bit more, of a physical battle than maybe some thought. I think it was 20 points under the over-under in this game, which I thought was a little bit shocking. But again, it goes back to the amount of rim protection that both these teams have. Duke was able to match up with it just as you'd suspect, and Cam Boozer's physicality really stood out to me. And for a freshman to be able to do that, it says a lot. It speaks volumes. I thought Shire coached a really good game. I thought Dusty May was, probably a little bit frustrated with Elliot Cadeau at times in this game. Cadeau had that injury kind of spell in the middle, came back, bounced back, hit a big 3 late. In this game, he struggled against Duke in the past with their size and length. He did again. Even the first play of this game, Elliot Cadeau, it was like a dunk to Adai Mara, like an easy lob that he would make 10 out of 10 times. And he threw it way behind him. And because he was worried about all the arms in the air, you know what I mean? Like Duke's length was in his head, and Mara made a great, kind of acrobatic play to get it with his left hand and ended up making the layup. Regardless of that, but again, that kind of was the telltale sign of like what Duke's size does to Cadeau a little bit. And, I think you look at the odds, Michigan's still the favorite to win the national championship. I'm okay with that being the case, but I'm also okay to say Duke's the best team in the country because I think they showed you why, and they have the best player in the country in Cam Boozer. So, I mean, the real takeaway for me is that you mentioned the front courts. Like, they matched up well, and Boozer was the best player on the court. I thought the Linda Borg commentary after the game was a little bit strange. We can talk about that if you want to, but overall, it was an impressive performance by both Duke and, definitely Cam Boozer.
Yeah, we'll get to Yaxel in a second. I just want to say really quickly, John Shire coached an amazing game because you look at what Michigan's really good at, besides on both rims, just, dominating with size and length and generating offensive rebounds, generating easy buckets, completely cutting off the supply of those to the other team. And essentially, like, the calculus is again, it's like Dusty May constructed a team to be impervious to upsets, right? It's like, we're not going to let you shoot threes. You're not going to get layups. So if you want to beat us by mid-ranging us to death or shooting 26 footers, good luck. Best of luck. And if someone does that, we'll tip our cap. But the idea is to have a little bit kind of like Florida, but almost at a supercharged level, because they do, Michigan can shoot on the other end of the floor, and they play up tempo and they space the floor and they get out and run. That calculus works against basically everybody. But Duke, like I said earlier, is like the 1 or 2 or 3, there's a small number of teams, and Arizona may be one of them as well, that can neutralize that built-in advantage that just kind of, whatever number of points you want to, accrue to Michigan in the course of a given game against an average opponent, your Indiana's or your, Wisconsin's a bad example because Wisconsin actually beat them. But, your Indiana's, even your Purdue, like teams that are just not built to be with them in the front court, give them 10, 12 points off the bat, and then you really got to shoot the lights out if you want to make up for it on the other end. Duke not only matched that, but made them play half court defense. Again, like you said, Duke does not play slow. Duke is not a slow team. They get out and play, and they get short possessions, and they get, the first good look or whatever. They're not super duper fast, but they're not like as slow as they played the other night. And it was a clear strategy to me of like, make these guys score in the half court. Do not give them easy transition buckets where they score a lot of their threes. Do not give them easy layups. Try to, as best you can, to rebound on the defensive end. And it essentially, at one point, it was like, well, like I was talking to my buddies about it. One of them went to Michigan. He was like, well, we didn't shoot it very well. And my response is, like, when is the last time Michigan needed to make threes to win a game? Usually it's just a cherry on top, and that's why they won by 25 or 30.
Right.
Like, there has never been a time this season where it's like, well, we shot poorly from three. So did Duke.
Yeah, Duke was 6 for 19. They were 6 for 25.
Exactly. And so that the whole point is like that built-in sort of mathematical structural advantage that for Michigan will work against basically everybody. Did not work against Duke. And I think Shire targeted those areas extremely well. And then, down the stretch, called a really smart game, got great shots in the moments that mattered, ran stuff that Michigan hadn't seen previously in the game. It was just a really incredible performance from the players on the floor and also from the bench. And yeah, it made me think, like, do I think Michigan is unlikely to get to the Final Four insofar as it's possible to say that, because getting to the Final Four is hard? Who knows? Maybe they'll play Florida in the Elite Eight or whatever. And
that was the other team. It's basically like Arizona, Florida, Duke, right? Those are the front courts that come to mind. And now without Toppin with Texas Tech, you kind of take that. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
those three front courts are the ones that you feel like would give them trouble just on paper.
And Todd Golden was watching that game being like, if it happens, I got a plan for this. You know what I mean? Like there's a blueprint here that we could also do if things break right for us. That said, I still think Michigan is like a Final Four national title team. It's just it's not an insult to say that they came from this team might be historically good to there's a way to beat this team. And it might only be a handful of teams that can do it, but it is possible to do. And I'm not sure that I saw that, with the exception of, again, the Wisconsin game, which was the classic, like, other team gets super hot, makes everything.
Can't miss.
You just kind of okay, like, you got to write that one off. If that happens to whatever, that's what UMBC did to Virginia. You just tip your cap and you have to own it. It's whatever. That is probably not how Michigan would lose in the NCAA tournament, I don't think. But I think what Duke did to them could only happen later in the tournament, but is the first time I've seen a team actually do it. So it's going to be interesting to see. We should talk about Yaxel after the game really quickly, because that was a bit odd. It was a bit weird, right? So essentially he was asked, he and the Michigan players, Morris Johnson included, I think there's one other guy at the podium, were asked, some version of, Cam Boozer, was he as good as you expected, or blah, blah, blah. And if you haven't seen the clip, Yaxel goes into this kind of exaggerated, I'm going to laugh. I got to hold myself back from laughing here. This is so funny. I can't find the words to say. He's doing this putting his hand over his mouth type of thing. And then Morris Johnson immediately jumps in and is like, oh yeah, no, he's a really talented player. We've played against a lot of talented players. I wouldn't say it was anything we didn't expect. Like, we knew he was good, but we play a lot, the standard college basketball player answer of like, yes, he's good. We also play other good guys. I'm not going to sit here and like gas him up for you, but yeah, he had a good game, whatever. Meanwhile, Yaxel is still over there like mugging for the camera. I think the idea was, I better not say what I want to say because I'll criticize the refs, because the idea being like Boozer got a bunch of calls that he shouldn't have gotten. But the whole thing was very odd to me, considering the outcome. Like, when I first saw it on Twitter, I was like, is this from before the game? You know what I mean? Like, that was my first response to it, was like, I don't want to say anything about it before the game. And then I actually sat and listened to the clip and saw the context and was like, this is odd, man. He just had a great game. You guys lost. Like, I don't get this.
Yeah, why add fuel to the fire? Like you said, I mean, Morris Johnson stepped in and gave the right answer, or at least like the expected, right answer that you're supposed to give, which is basically like, great player. We've played against great players, and
even if you don't believe it, just BS it and get in and get out.
Just say it. And I mean, look, he had 7 free throws in the game. Boozer did. And like you said, maybe that was the implication. I just felt like it was a subtle way to kind of take a shot at a kid that is by far the national player of the year. And to kind of see that, Cam Boozer was asked about Yaxel. And like I was around Cam, at the McDonald's All-American game. I came away thoroughly impressed with how mature he is, just kind of as a person. And, I don't know Yaxel. I've never interviewed Yaxel, never been in his proximity, but it just was a weird situation. And everyone, the Michigan crowd, like they come out and they're like, you don't get the full context of the clip. He was laughing because Morris Johnson was like, they were both like cracking each other up about it or whatever. And regardless of like any of that sort of stuff reading between the lines, it just like is such a layup. And why, after a loss, would you give more fuel to the fire to a team that you're probably, it's not a guarantee, obviously nothing is with the NCAA tournament, but you're probably going to see this team again in Indianapolis if things go as they are expected to go in the tournament. Why would you give Cam Boozer any sort of ammunition for the next time to be like, oh, you think I'm not that guy? Well, I will have to remind you yet again. I just don't understand it. It's very strange to me. And
I already busted your ass once. I got to do it again.
It's like, do you want to see it again? Like here it is. Like
I'd be like, he's amazing, and we have no chance of stopping him. If we see him again, he's gonna beat us again for sure. Like I'd be going the opposite direction with it.
It's just a lack of decorum, I guess is the right way to put it. It just like doesn't like make any sense to me at any level. And Dusty was there in the middle of it, and I almost thought that like Dusty would like hit him in the leg and just be like, just say, you know what I mean? Just say the line, like just say what you're supposed to say.
Say the line, Bart.
Yeah, get us out of here,
Played against good players.
Yeah, it's just such a layup. And, I understand heat of the battle, frustration, all that sort of stuff. But these are the top 2 players in the country. They're going to be up for National Player of the Year. Josh Jefferson with Iowa State's also in the mix as well. I just thought it was like a way to create a story when there was just no need for it at all. And again, you're just giving like it seems to be like a thing with Cam Boozer because it's not so flashy that everybody kind of wants to take some shots at him. And I just feel like you're setting yourself up, like I can't say it any other way. It's like you really don't want to like give him any more reason to beat you because he's going to probably beat you regardless. So, I mean, and not saying to Michigan, I'm just saying in general, like I've been confused by the conversation around Cam Boozer. We're getting to the point where like Cam Boozer is going to be the safest pick at the number 1 pick, like it's going to be like, that's going to be where we get to at some point with this,
Yeah.
So yeah, and look, I'm a Carolina guy, and even I am just like, why would you? What are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, what is the point of this?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, look, the Cam Boozer conversation. I've said numerous times, like he breaks my brain because he does feel watching him play like a 22, 23-year-old guy who's been in college basketball forever. That's a compliment, right? Mm-hmm. But it also, those kinds of, it's from the NBA draft perspective, insofar as I know anything about the draft, which I don't. It's from the perspective of like, this guy doesn't scream like, oh my God, he's the number 2, number 3, number 4 overall pick, even though he's super productive in college. Because I've seen a gazillion guys who are super productive in college have great seasons and go in the second round or whatever. I will say that the Michigan game was an eye-opening experience because, look, he's played good front courts before this season. He's not played anything like Michigan. And he basically looked like he usually does. You know what I mean? That, like, whether it's Mara or Lendeberg or Johnson who's guarding him, like whoever it was, he gets the ball where he gets the ball. He turns and does his stuff. He either makes a great play with a pass, or he gets to the front of the rim or onto his left shoulder and he scores a bucket. And it's just like, okay, if you're doing this against Michigan's front court, then I kind of, it makes sense to me like why NBA scouts see you doing this in the pros. And obviously he has a ton of skill that's not just like a bruiser front court guy. Like his passing and his vision and his ability to make reads and all that stuff is like super duper elite. But yeah, it was a bit of an eye-opening experience for me, and that's part of the reason why that clip was confusing to me. Because if I was like Yaxel Lendeberg, I'd be like, yeah, actually, he's really good,
Yeah, it's like
if I was
it
a
also
hater
is like who
before, I no
cares what
longer
it
can.
translates to the NBA at this point? It's like he is dominating college basketball, you know, and it's like you're going to see him again in a month. Why give him anything? Like it just seems like a very strange. I don't know. I don't get it.
Not a great idea. But yeah, we'll see. Michigan, slight tick down for me in the historic great team potentially walking their way to the national title conversation after that game, and
Maybe they
a
learned
slight
something though.
tick
You know
up.
what I mean? Like that's really that's every good coach, every great coach talks about like in a season. It's like there's a game that's on the schedule that's like we wouldn't have won the title without that game teaching us something about ourselves. And like this could be that game for them, right? They thought they were infallible as a front court. They learned the lesson the hard way. And maybe that's a reason for them to go on a run and be unstoppable down the stretch. You know, that's sort of how it goes.
Yeah, and Mara had foul trouble too. That you know, that may be a factor.
Also, Hamenia, can I just give him a shout out? I mean, that was the best.
Do.
That was the best game of his career. And he was like, I'm not, I'm sure he's had a game where I think he had 18 points or whatever. I'm just saying as far as impact, like he had 9 very consequential rebounds in this game.
True.
And like, they just were like game changing plays. And, Hamenia has been kind of unheralded. No one really talks about him, but he's a McDonald's All-American. Of course, Duke has a million of them on their team. But I really thought he had an impactful game, and no one's going to be bringing up Nick Hamenia, but I thought he was really good in this game.
I like that, and it's also a sign about Duke. It was like you said, like they'll have a guy like that who's like, yeah, he plays a few minutes a game. Yeah, he's a McDonald's All-American. He's like 6'8", super good. Like, he just barely plays though.
Broke his high school record scoring record.
Can't find a place in the rotation for this guy. That's kind of Duke in a nutshell with their recruiting these days. I mean, they played 8 guys in this game. Cam Boozer, Dame Sarr, Caleb Foster, and Ngangba, Isaiah Evans, Hamenia, Malik Brown, Caden Boozer. That's kind of like the 8 you'd put together. There's a few guys out there that you'd maybe swap in if you could, create your all-star team or whatever. But in terms of recruiting to a single school with an 8-man roster of guys who are going to play, it doesn't get much better than that. So, yeah, Duke up in our estimation slightly as though, they hadn't been amazing already. Okay. Speaking of slightly up in our estimations, UCLA, you were at that game, Illinois, UCLA. I don't know if there's a player in the country that if I have a baseline out of bounds in like 5 seconds to get something close to a layup, that for all of his flaws, his inability to shoot from the perimeter or whatever, Donovan Dent, take the ball 90 feet, try to get a layup. That's probably the number one guy in the country you'd want to have. How was the game? You were at Pauley for that.
It was not a robust crowd to open up, and I was with
it rarely is.
Yeah, full disclosure. I was with like an Illinois friend. Shout out to my guy Pete Fox, and he's like in the bag with the Illinois crowd. So I'm like amongst like the Illinois people behind the bench there, and they're up 20 plus points in this game, and we're talking about, man, Mick Cronin is losing his mind over there. Like, what a nice environment. This is so fun. Illinois fans are doing ILL. INI, you know what I mean? They're taking over Pauley Pavilion, and all signs are pointing to like a great game. Boswell has a weird injury that he goes back for. Wagler has the shoulder injury, right? And then all of a sudden, it's just like UCLA just keeps chipping away. And then this game ends up going to overtime. And crazy enough, like as that's happening, they added 1.8 seconds on the clock there, like after the made basket by Wagler, which Wagler was incredible down the stretch. I saw people talking about like, he can't even dunk. How is he a lottery pick and all that sort of stuff. I don't really care if he's a lottery pick. He's an incredible player to watch. And like, he was so good down the stretch in that game. And again, hits what seemed to be the game-winning basket there. They add 1.8 seconds to the clock. You look up, you're in Pauley Pavilion. Tyus Edney, the moment, and, I'm with an Illinois crowd, and there's a guy behind us, and he's just like, I really hope we don't get a Tyus Edney moment here. And it was just like this ominous, it was like, don't say it out loud, because then, the tongue is a spell, right? And you cast it out to the world, and things can happen in real time. And, it was a great set. It was a great timeout, I thought, by Underwood. He saw what they were setting up. takes a timeout, and I thought he had actually adjusted accordingly. And I was like, okay, he kind of sees what they're setting up here for Dent to get this ball like on kind of like a little switch around. And he did not. Donovan Dent gets around the edge, turns the corner. Nobody stops the ball. An incredible finish, an incredible reaction. UCLA storms the court. Mick is finally happy after a very, insane week for Mick Cronin with all of his antics, which we can talk about that as well. But a great game. Like for a Saturday that was all Duke, Michigan, Arizona, Houston, rightfully so. I thought it ended up being the most, exciting game of the day. And if you didn't watch it, I mean, maybe go back and check it out because it was a lot of fun, a lot of back and forth. Like I said, Wagler was incredible. You had the Sky Clark of it all, right? Sky Clark, who had left Illinois. Illinois fans are going at him. Sky Clark fouls out of the game. They're having fun, going back and forth. Just a fun college basketball atmosphere in general, and an incredible ending and a nice tip of the cap to Tyus Edney there with Donovan Dent getting his moment, and a guy who kind of needed a moment after some struggles this season. So a great game, a great finish, and I have a little bit of a soft spot for Mick. I've always enjoyed Mick's press conferences. Those were, I'm out in Los Angeles, so I like to go to UCLA games. I like to go see Mick in the press conference every once in a while to kind of hear what he's talking about. So yeah, just a great atmosphere. I felt bad for, the Illini fans that were in the building, but happy for UCLA. They needed that game badly.
Yeah. It was a great game. It was one of those, watching all the games on Saturday, that I was like, oh, Illinois is up by like 20 here.
Yeah, it was over.
I'm done with this. I'm going to turn my attentions elsewhere, or like go grab a slice of pizza or whatever. And then, UCLA chips away. The lead was manageable at halftime. And then it led to what ended. Brad Underwood's comments afterwards were kind of interesting in that he talked about defensive rebounding on simple plays and missed free throws and just like the little stuff that drives him nuts. That's like the difference. I think his quote was
free
like,
throws for sure.
You do this in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, your season's over. Like, we cannot have that. And I think he kind of has his finger on the pulse of like the Illinois fan base a little bit, because for as good as Illinois' teams have been under him pretty routinely, the occasional lack of defense, they don't really have that this year. They're typically a pretty good defensive team this year, although they were not on Saturday night. And like the little detail type stuff, for as much great offense as they play, there's sometimes little detail stuff with Illinois that I think kind of drives their fans insane. Like, missing free throws and easy box outs is the route one way to drive your most loyal fans completely over a cliff. So that was interesting. And then obviously Cronin's quotes were pregame really were interesting. Obviously, I agree. I have a soft spot for Mick. And so it was a little bit, it was both kind of funny and also a little bit, I don't know if sad's the right word, but just kind of a little bit like unfortunate to see him.
He kind of crossed the line, you know what I mean? Like it was,
he did.
It was like yeah, it was like, come on, Mick. But it was
first
hilarious.
of all,
are you raising
he
your
threw
voice
his own guy out of a game, which is like, that's the ref's job,
right?
Right? Like he threw his own player out of it. He ejected his own player, which was a truly sensational piece of footage, but also just like, relax. Like the foul wasn't as, it was assessed what it should have been.
We've seen a lot worse.
It was a flagrant one. He got a flagrant one. That's it. Okay. Like, if you want to sit him down the rest of the game, sit him down, but don't like humiliate him. When really he was kind of trying to make a hustle play and just got it wrong. Like, I don't think anyone watching the clip back, and we're talking about Steve Jamerson, for in a foul against Michigan State when they were down like 25 or whatever, on a breakaway, got a flagrant one. Truly think he was just trying to chase it down and block it and just got it wrong. I don't think he was trying to do anything nefarious, but Cronin got him over on the bench and then went into ref mode, gave him the umpire, you're out of here sort of thing, and told him to walk to the locker room, which was kind of hilarious, honestly. And also kind of like, okay, take it easy now, Mick, like relax a little bit. And then after the game was asked by a local reporter in East Lansing about Michigan State student section, and said he didn't give a shit about Michigan State student section, and also asked the reporter why he was raising his voice. The reporter was not raising his voice. This was on video.
And then he reminded the reporter that it's on video, which was the
it was
part.
like, this is on video, right? And he's like,
it's like, Mick, do you know it's on video?
And so it was just like this, like he just had like a night full of complete head loss. Like his head was on Mars. It was bad. Now, I will say, and I kind of expected this, but it did happen. Especially after a weekend where that clip specifically, both clips, frankly, went pretty viral and like did the thing where they broke the barrier of like college basketball accounts are tweeting about this to like your Barstools and your main accounts, your ESPNs, whatever are now tweeting these clips. And, he came out in his pregame press conference before the Illinois game, said he had apologized to Steve Jamerson. Said that, like, I thought he made a dirty play. I tried to wipe the guy out. You can't be down 25. You're getting your butt kicked. Don't try to take somebody out or hurt somebody or the other team, which is what I thought. I'm sure I was blocked. I'm on the other end. Their reaction, I thought he tried to crush this kid. Steve is everything that's good about college basketball. He walked on. He got on at San Diego, got a scholarship, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I was wrong. I apologized. I need to dial back some of my humor, so I apologize. Sometimes I'm too candid. For example, talking about how bad our flight was after the NCAA tournament. You have to realize, and I have to do a better job of this, that in this climate, you have to be careful about what you say. I think that was also a reference to Brad Underwood, who had previously said, some coaches complain about the long trips in the Big Ten these days. And Underwood was like, we fly a private plane. We stay in nice hotels. We eat great food. Like, it's really not that hard. We just have to play good basketball. So Cronin apologized. I don't know if he's issued an apology to the reporter in question, but it was a very funny, 4 days for Mick Cronin. And then it ended with a win that should de-stress him a little bit because they're much more likely to make the NCAA tournament now. And I don't think he is particularly used to life on the bubble, even if it's becoming a little bit more usual for UCLA these days.
Yeah, he got off, he really got off like the hot seat, Mick Cronin. Are we sure he's the right man for UCLA? Just in that moment. And I think just conjuring up like a Tyus Edney callback for UCLA fans, it was cathartic for them. They needed to have that moment. And Mick definitely needed to have that moment. And he was a maniac throughout the entire game. So it's not like he's changed. You know what I mean? That's what I was kind of there for like a self-scout of like, where is Mick at? Like, is he going to temper it down a little bit? No, he was a temper tantrum, as he always is. And
he's like that with his best teams, though. Like his teams that are like number one seeds, he's a complete maniac too. Like that never changes. It's just like, you can stomp around and be mad at your players. There's lots of coaches who do that. But when you're kicking them out of games preemptively when the referees have decided not to, you might need to take a little bit of a breather there. Okay. Well, so the other game more recently tonight, Monday night, before the big Houston, Kansas, we should talk really quickly, UNC Louisville. Let's do your UNC vibe check-in. They're kind of hanging in right now. I'd say more than hanging in without Caleb Wilson. And he's over on the sideline, jumping up and down, fighting for every call. The vibe seemed to be pretty good with Carolina and not so good with Louisville. Where are we at?
Yeah, North Carolina undefeated at home, beat the number one team in the country, Duke at home, which is, you
got to get that one in there.
Well, if you told North Carolina fans that at the beginning of the season, they'd be like, man, this is great, right? But for whatever reason, the NC State game, rightfully so. I mean, that was such a debacle that I think it kind of soured a lot of feelings towards this team, and I think it changed the conversation. I don't know if you saw, Joe Lunardi's bracketology, right? He's basically saying like North Carolina can't get above a 6 seed line, and all this sort of stuff. Like as he's apt to do, that's part of his shtick now is like to try to poke at North Carolina fans, I think, for a reaction. A lot of that stuff kind of just
true.
Feeds.
Like,
no,
yeah,
it's just, this man has never been right about. I know he created bracketology, but like he's never been right about it.
If they won at Duke, they definitely could.
I mean, it's just
after
so
tonight, like
bracketology at this point and throughout the year as he does is so asinine that it drives a sane man insane. That's all I'll say. But yeah,
I will. Speaking of asinine, I want to bring this up. And
Please.
speaking of weird post-game press conferences, the NC State guys, after the Carolina game, I know I'm speaking to a captured audience here, so this is maybe not a fair assessment. We should maybe get like an NC State fan on the show to talk about this. We're not
For
gonna
what
do
it's
that.
worth,
That's
like
not
I have
lazy.
never like when NC State made the Final Four, I was like pulling for the, like not like pulling for them, but I was just like, hey, I'm happy. I hope they play well against Purdue. You know what I mean? Like I've never been one of those people, but yeah, that after that game,
this is what the big brother says to the little brother. Meanwhile, the little brother absolutely despises the big brother and everything he stands for. I've never rooted against you. What's your problem?
Yeah,
and it's just like, I can't stand you. I hate you and everything you stand for. But no, the post game like belt thing that the NC State players did, I was like, all right, guys, Faisar was out. Caleb Wilson didn't play. You're making reference to something Caleb Wilson said in like August or whatever. He's injured. He has a fractured hand. Kadir Copeland told him to lace him up next time or whatever.
He has a
just like, well, he
fractured
can't.
wrist.
He has a broken hand. Like he's not pulling a Darryn
crazy.
Peterson. Like he's super actually injured. He has a big wrap on his hand. Like I was just like, all right, guys, relax. Like good win. I get it. It was sort of like they had planned this post game situation if they won. And
For a
they were
long
going to do
time.
it regardless of the circumstances. But
yeah, there
anyway.
were people on staff that were like sending text messages at halftime to, like basically gloating about where they stood at halftime and all that sort of stuff. And I was just like, guys, can we tone it? Can we temper it down a smidge? But yeah, they dominated that game. I mean, it was the biggest win since 1962. I have no problem with like the celebration, but again, context does matter, especially without Caleb Wilson and Vassar. But look, I'm happy for NC State to like be in the mix. Will Wade is like a great person to add into the mix in the ACC. This was kind of like if you're Will Wade, who's married to someone who went to UNC, which I do find hilarious, he has to win this game. Because NC State fans, like you said, like this is what they want. Like they're like, give it to us. And so he delivered. Kevin Keats won his first game against Carolina. Sidney Lowe won his first game against Carolina, right? Like if you do that first, like you automatically get like a longer leash and a longer runway. So he did the right thing. He did what he had to do. I think Kadir Copeland's having an incredible year, right? I mean, they've turned him into a point guard. He's been great for them. Vin Allen Lubin was very excited, right? He had the bedazzled belt around his neck. It was a very interesting moment. But for Carolina fans, they were just like, people were walking off the cliff after that game. They're like, I am done. Get Hubert out of here, they went the other direction. And then for Saturday, for them to show up, play well against Syracuse, to beat Louisville at home, Seth Trimble 30 points in that game. It does feel like it's tempered some of the overreaction to NC State as well. So like you said, I mean, 3-1 without Caleb. You really couldn't ask for anything else at this point without Caleb. And from what I hear, Caleb's planning to come back at least for the ACC tournament, if not earlier. And if that's the case, then North Carolina's ceiling definitely changes when he returns.
Yeah. As for Louisville,
Oof.
at what point are Louisville fans kind of like, so my context was I have a guy in my Substack chat who is active anytime there's a Louisville game going on. And I would probably I just in isolation probably put him on the more critical end of the spectrum, but I feel like I'm affected by that. I don't know, because I have a very anecdotal sample size, but I'm kind of curious now, and maybe people can reach out about this. Speaking of reaching out, the NC State person tweeted me today talking about Kadir Copeland being a point guard. Apparently we called him not a point guard early in the season.
They're very upset about this.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a point guard, but he is playing point guard. He's like point forward, I guess.
A random tweet out of nowhere adding me. I was just like, I guess I probably said that earlier this year. I'm not even going to go into it. But I do I would be interested to hear from Louisville fans kind of where they are right now. Cause like, it's been a good season. They're, whatever it is now, 15th in KenPom, or 17th now. They are going to be in the NCAA tournament as a mid-single digit seed, like relative to where they were 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Huge improvement. But also tonight, I believe, was their last opportunity to win a top 25 road game. And Louisville as a program hasn't done that since like COVID. So it's, there's been a ton of progress made in a very short period of time, but also maybe not quite to the level that maybe Louisville fans were expecting coming into the season. When people looked at their transfer portal, intake and were like, maybe this is a little sneaky national title team if they're like halfway decent defensively. And they kind of have been. They're not terrible defensively, at least numbers wise. But I think in the SMU game you saw, you can get at them if you've got the right players like a Booby Miller to just sort of totally break down the defense. And I think they're very variance reliant in terms of shooting. And if they don't light you up, there's a decent chance you can beat them.
Yeah, I think that's the word. I mean, when you talk about Louisville under Pat Kelsey, it's just variance. It's like this team, if they're on, they look like they can beat anybody. If they're off, they look very susceptible to lose to anybody. And I think if you're just forecasting the NCAA tournament, that's just a very scary proposition for this team. Mikael Brown has been great at times, but he when he's not kind of playing out of the pick and roll and is having to kind of turn the corner on his own, he has a bit of a hard time to get that first step by guys, which has been exploited a little bit. Conwell's been a nice piece for them, but again, it's all variance. Like if he's hitting shots, yes, he is great. Hadley's been a nice kind of X factor for them, just sort of a tough, piece for that machine. But just in general, I just feel like the philosophy of Pat Kelsey might have to adjust depending on what happens in the tournament this year, because they're almost too deep and you almost don't know what version of Louisville you're going to get, and who's going to play what minutes. And it just feels like they're almost fact finding within a game. And then sometimes the game slips away from them because they're in the midst of doing that. So I think that's probably the frustration. It's a world of difference from Kenny Payne, like you said, so you can't get too up in arms about where you stand right now. But they've also seen the Rick Pitino version of a Louisville team that was, winning national championships and competing for the ACC at a high level. So, like, they know what good basketball looks like. One of the best fan bases you'll ever find. I always love that Carolina-Louisville game. There's been some great moments throughout the years. Mikael Brown did not have his best effort tonight, but they almost found a way to win that game. I mean, they fought back.
Yeah, it was close at the end.
They were down 16 and were able to fight back. So I guess that's one silver lining if you're Louisville fans at this point. But you're right. They still need like that signature win to kind of be like, okay, here we go. We're rolling. This is the version of this team that we need, and we can believe in this team in March. Because right now it feels like 7-10, 6-11, kind of a, you play a hot team that's an 11 seed. It's not going to be a good matchup for Louisville.
No, it could get dicey. And that marquee win will have to come almost certainly
in the tournament,
the ACC tournament or the NCAA tournament, because they've got Clemson at Clemson, Syracuse, and then at Miami. So
and Clemson, who's faltering in their own way, who's not playing.
Yeah,
well.
big time. Yeah, big time. Clemson is on a big time downslope to the point where they're not quite on the bubble, but another loss or two, and
they're like a 9, 8, 9, 10 seed range, and they were 4, 5, 6 range for quite a while.
Yeah.
Not to be Joe Lunardi here and start giving you seeds. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds.
Yeah. You like to stay away from all bracket talk when you can. You've been negatively polarized against bracket talk in the years that Carolina has been like on the bubble. You can't.
I've turned on the bubble. I'm Mick Cronin in a post game when it comes to bubble talk.
His quote earlier this year about like he was asked about like, oh, you need this win for the tournament or whatever. He's like, I'm not looking at the bracket websites. I am just I need to find a baseline out of bounds.com or whatever. And that's actually the right attitude if you're a coach.
I agree.
I've had, coaches talk like get in touch over the years, be like, oh, do we need to beat this team? Blah, blah, blah. Like, what do you think? And it's just like, hey man, I'm happy to talk about this with you if you want to, but you should just focus on winning basketball games. I promise the rest will take care of itself. That's literally the only thing that matters. And it always fundamentally comes down to that. Speaking of which, last thing, second to last thing, Cincinnati's good now at basketball. We got Carolina connection, Wes Miller, got to shout him out. He's been a dead man walking, if not actually in terms of his job, but spiritually for like 3 months. Like no one has given more apologetic and like visibly shaken press conferences after the end of games this year than Wes Miller. But you go back and look at the stats now after the win at Kansas. In the last 4 games since February 7th, they are 6th in the country in efficiency performance per Torvik. And if you go back to January 1st, they're 23rd in the country in efficiency performance. That's a long sample size now. And we're looking at, again, not to do bracket talk, but we're looking at a potentially one of the great late season bubble pushes, the likes of which we used to get from like Ed Cooley, where they'd win like the last 6 games and come out of nowhere after losing to terrible teams in the non-conference. And it's like, oh, actually they're like a 9 seed now. So if it continues apace for Cincinnati, we will be having that conversation. But it's been a really funny thing to see this team that I certainly wrote off in November or December or whenever it was. Now, after the win at Kansas, forcing a reconsideration and actually looking kind of good and potential. Like, it's one thing like, oh yeah, their resume is not very good right now. But when you're looking at these teams on the bubble or whatever, it's like, who's playing well right now? And Cincinnati's playing really well and have been playing, even when they've lost games, they've been playing above expectation for a while now. And so those are the kind of teams you kind of have to pay attention to, because they're more likely than your, Cals or whomever to win the games they need to win between now and Selection Sunday.
And they got a big opportunity tonight, if you're listening on Tuesday, at Texas Tech. You win that game, another ranked win. You got BYU coming up at home, which is another opportunity to get a nice win. And you said it, ever since Wes is definitely like a Roy Williams player, like that was the most Roy Williams thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like going up and apologizing, just being like, I promise you nobody cares as much as I care, and you deserve better. And you got to understand.
That was Roy all over. Yeah.
That was so Roy Williams. And, I am happy to see them playing at this level. And I think it really comes down to Cincinnati's a top 10 KenPom defense, but they have a putrid offense. I think it's like 150 in the country. So if they just play like, average on the offensive end, they're a really tough team to match up with. And, just seeing how they kind of defended Kansas versus what even we saw tonight with Houston, I think kind of shows you the level they can get to defensively. And that, again, is their calling card. It's what Wes is about. So they've got some opportunities ahead. And if it all kind of breaks in the right way, what a story that would be for, he might still get fired, but they still might have like a little false hope run to the NCAA tournament, which would be fun for, again, that's a program that loves college basketball. And they've got an interesting team, and they had an incredible game on Saturday with a lot of people watching too, because I think a lot of people are watching for the Darryn Peterson of it all. So I just think like the casual fans committee, all these people saw that game, they're like, why isn't Cincinnati in the tournament? Which might bode well for them too.
Yeah, and again, Bill Self tonight was like, on Monday night was like, we played not very well, but Cincinnati also played great. And I think Bill Self is probably aware, like as much as anybody else coming into that game, and probably was trying to tell his players, like, look, guys, slough it off if you want to, but we got to be focused here, because these guys are actually playing super well. They won 3 straight coming in. They beat UCF badly, and that's a tournament team, most likely. On February 8th, they beat them by 20. They're scoring a lot of points these days. Like they're like 340 points in the last 260 possessions, something like that. So like, you add that into the defense that's always kind of been there for them. And yeah, they're an interesting, all of a sudden, like a super interesting team that, again, as someone who is writing about this every week on Bubble Watch and like tracking these teams, it's always super fun to get a team that's nowhere close to it, you think, up until like the last 4 or 5 games of the season. It's like all of a sudden this team just comes out of nowhere. And that used to be the Ed Cooley special. It's not the Ed Cooley special currently at Georgetown, which just lost a game to Seton Hall. I just want to throw this stat on the podcast real quick before we go. The first time the 6th time in the history of Division I men's basketball that a team has shot has gone 0% from 3 on at least 18 attempts and won a basketball game. Georgetown was the loser of that game against Seton Hall. I've never seen a worse stat, honestly. Just 51-47 was the final score. Holy moly. We don't even need to talk about that.
And Ed Cooley is shaming UConn fans for not coming to want to watch him play on Valentine's Day,
Meanwhile,
and
Capital
hitting
One
babies
has
with
like
bottles.
50 people in the gym on a regular basis.
That's where we're
literally
at
it's friends and family only at Capital One Arena these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, we got some great games coming up this week. We'll talk about them next week. We got St. John's UConn, which will be an actually fun Big East game. Very interested in the sort of vibes comparison between those two games. Friday night, I got to be honest, I'm kind of loving the Big Ten Friday night games these days, and this week especially. Michigan at Illinois is a spectacular one. That'll be fun. Lots of good stuff to get to. It's been a long show. We're gonna wrap it there. Tate, thank you very much as ever,
of course,
for being here. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody at Basket Under Review. Thanks to our producer, Corey Aldis. Thanks to Trilly and all the guys at BUR. We will be back next week with another episode as we get ever closer to the greatest month of the year. And we'll see how the Darryn Peterson situation goes. Maybe we just won't have to talk about it anymore.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. He'll just be a normal college basketball player and it won't be a thing anymore. We'll see how it goes. All right, that's it for us. Thanks very much. We'll see you next week.